Invasive species jeopardize the Great Lakes and other local bodies of water. One of these common aquatic hitchhikers is the sea lamprey. Northern News Now's Isabella Zadra caught up with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service today, getting to see control efforts in action.
Sea lamprey are an invasive species that once jeopardized the Great Lake fishing economy. Each adult lamprey capable of killing up to 40 pounds of fish each. Since these creatures invaded the Great Lakes, they have had a negative impact. But the Sea Lamprey Control program is doing everything to bring down the populations of these underwater vampires.
We are conducting a lampricide treatment to kill larval sea lampreys in the stream. Sean
Nowicki is a part of Sea Lamprey Control. One of the methods used to control lamprey population is the use of lampricides, chemicals that kill the larvae in streams before they are old enough to migrate to bigger bodies of water, which Nowicki assures is safe for other aquatic and land life.
The Health Canada organization, they have deemed that the lampricide that's applied and the concentrations in which we apply them have no unreasonable effect on any organism, humans or otherwise.
Zach Allen works with the Great Lakes Fishing Commission and says that lamprey control isn't a one-person job. It takes everyone.
Community support, especially with landowners who grant the agents access to their land to apply the lampricide or to do larval assessment surveys. That's very, very important that we have the support of the community and partner organizations as well.
Both Allen and Nowicki say the biggest thing people can personally do for the lamprey population is to dispatch any lamprey they might find while exploring the Great Lakes. At the White River, Isabella Zadra, Northern News Now.
And since the invention of lampricides in 1958, the Sea Lamprey Control has reduced the population by 90%.